Hello and welcome to the Kentucky Today podcast. I'm Lawrence Smith, the editor of Kentucky Today. Well, we were all shocked by the video of the protesters disrupting a church service at the city's church in Minneapolis. The incident underscores the need for church security. So I talked to an expert on church security. Jim Wilcox, a Kentucky Baptist, talks about how churches should prepare for the worst. When you watch the video, I assume you watched the video of the protest in Minneapolis.
I have. Yes.
When you watch that video of the protesters invading the city's church in Minneapolis, what was your first reaction? What thoughts went through your mind?
My first reaction was, honestly, since I trained church security teams, as I was looking for evidence of a team, I could tell that it was kind of a flash mob where it was pre-planned and organized to come in and disrupt the service. So I was just observing immediately because I'm kind of trained to do that. And I train others to do it. So I wanted to see if there was a security team presence to see how the senior pastor, lead pastor would handle the invasion. So just observing, pretty much from the time it started, I knew what was happening. What concerned me is that it was going to turn violent, which thankfully it didn't. So that was the first thoughts through my mind.
So what did you see? Did you see evidence of any kind of security training there? Not to second guess the church, but I'm curious.
No, of course not. I didn't see any evidence of it. My training would have been to have a security team to protect the pastor, pastoral guard, as it were, because oftentimes they're the target in an invasion or an active shooter situation. So I didn't see evidence. I saw church members frightened. I observed them being terrified, actually, especially children. It was very concerning and bothersome for me to watch it as a trainer.
Most agreed that protest kind of crossed a line that had rarely, if ever, been crossed before. Are you concerned this kind of thing might happen more often now?
I am. I have seen a tremendous escalation and increase in attacks of all kind, service disruptions. And so when I go in to train a church security team, I train them at multiple levels, how to deal with a deadly threat, how to deal with non-deadly threat. That one yesterday did not appear to be a deadly threat, so not requiring a deadly threat response. So training teams to make sure that they're very aware, situationally aware and observant to match the threat according to their training to deal with it properly and legally. That's very important.
Not to get into all your training, but how do you tell the difference right away, whether it's a deadly threat or a non-deadly threat?
Well, most of the time it's a visual. I teach my students to look at the hands and waist to see if any instrument of deadly threat appears, such as a gun, knife, bat, brass knuckles, something that could cause great bodily harm or death. And that's when you have to make a decision if you're going to respond with a deadly response. Short of that, which it was short of that yesterday, it's almost as if they were provoking a physical response. And thankfully, they did not respond physically. Yeah.
So what should churches be doing right now to get ready for something like this?
Well, most of the time in the past, there have been small disruptions. If it's an organized, what we call antisocial issue, of oftentimes between 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 people. And then there is specific training, and each church has to make a decision, frankly, how they're going to respond to it. And I give them options in responding. Well, when you have a mass mob of apparently appears 15 to 20 or more people, it's very difficult to deal with that because you have so many people that you're dealing with. Ideally, it would be better if you have the time and patience to dial 911, get your local police department on the scene ASAP, and let them deal with the hands-on, because I really don't want my people that I'm training to go hands-on unless they have to, unless they have no other choice, because then begins the cascade of possible felonies, felony assault. Um, so again, I thought the church handled it well yesterday, considering I would like to have seen a trained, educated security team, but the members and the pastor handled it remarkably well. By the way, kudos to them, because they didn't allow any to be provoked any physical response that could have been claimed to be a felony response.
That's where I want to go next. Should churches have some kind of security team in place, and what does that look like?
Oh, that's a great question. The answer is yes. They should have a security/safety team in place, and not only for disruptive or violent threats, but also to deal with fire emergencies, weather emergencies, medical emergencies. So there should be an umbrella of all those things that a safety team should be educated, trained, and prepared for. So that is a training process. It doesn't just happen naturally. It's helpful if you have doctors, of course, and medical people for medical emergencies, but all other training requires certified training from some source.
And this is regardless of church size?
Especially, frankly, smaller and medium-sized churches, which is where I generally focus. Most larger churches have already done it. They have hired resource officers, law enforcement officers, oftentimes to be on their team, parking a sheriff's vehicle, for instance, at the entrance. So they oftentimes have volunteer or paid professionals, and they have the resources to do that, both money and personnel. Medium to smaller churches oftentimes do not. So they're looking for ways to get their people trained, which is where I come in, to help them to learn how to defend themselves and to do it the right way, the legal way, so as to draw the least possibility of a legal action, charges, or lawsuit against the church and individuals defending the people.
So you kind of addressed my next question. Where do churches start? Do they need to bring in someone like you or some professional to help them start this process?
Well, what they need to do is number one, to make sure their church leadership understands, and church leadership is driving it. That being the lead or senior pastor, elders, deacons, whatever the denomination is, where they okay it, and they look for creating an emergency action plan. If something happens, what do we do? And then to vet and consider members to serve on the team, both men and women, by the way. Women are an important part of the team. And then once that's established and they've committed those people, to bring in someone like myself to train them, to make sure they get off on the right foot, because it's a constant training and education process. I may go in for an entire Saturday for 7 or 8 hours, but it takes a lot of preparation, a continuing evolving education to deal with such a thing. Again, because we've had so little what we call flash mob type threats in the past, it's a new thing. Same thing as in Michigan recently, where a man drove his truck through the windows for access, and then he got out with his gun and started shooting people. So I'm having to now ask churches to go back and say, hey, you need to put up some type of barrier, large boulders or something in front of areas where you can drive through. So it's a constantly changing landscape, dealing with new threats, different types of threats. And it's not, you're talking about international terrorism, domestic terrorism, service disruptions, folks who have addiction issues, who may pose a threat to certain staff in the church and or the church itself. So there are so many layers of threats and multiple threats. It's a constant vigilance to make sure all that's taken care of. I tell the team members that I train that they are sheepdogs. What does that mean? Sheepdogs mingle with the sheep, and their job is to observe, be situationally aware, and to deal with any threat that's coming to the sheep to harm them.
So these folks are not necessarily those who may physically respond to a threat, but keep their eyes open, know how to get people out if necessary. Those kinds of things are also part of the security team.
Absolutely. Yes, you want to be able to evacuate, to head off danger if possible, to keep it outside. I never want people to have to deal with the threat inside unless they have to. So we talked about ways to de-escalate, to avoid conflict if possible, as a gentle response to start with, and then respond as they have to protect the sheep.
You mentioned this earlier, but what about having off-duty police on your church property if possible?
I think it's an excellent layer of protection. They can serve as a deterrent. For instance, if they hire a policeman to stand in the foyer, for instance, and park his vehicle out front, if someone drives by with ill intent and they see a police vehicle or law enforcement vehicle parked out front, they may say, hey, this is not a soft target. Churches are notorious soft targets these days because we're a welcoming community. We want people to come in and find salvation, to find Christ. Hurting people, we want that. So it's a paradox because we want that to happen. We're still disciples of Christ. At the same time, the other side of the paradox is we need to protect the sheep against threats of all sorts. So it's a very, very thin line that you walk, and the team members must know, recognize, be educated, and committed to recognize how to deal with that threat appropriately.
There are some churches and some communities where members carry concealed into church. If something like Minneapolis happened there, are you concerned about what could happen if you have so many people in the church who are armed?
That is a major concern that almost every pastor shares. I would say, depending on the church, there may be as many as 5 to 10% of the people carrying concealed who unfortunately are untrained, uneducated. And so their first reaction may be to draw their weapon from concealment and just start shooting. The risk of collateral damage to members and shooting people where there's not a deadly threat is a real concern for pastors, as it should be. So most pastors will, if they have a security team, will encourage their concealed carry people not on the team to keep their guns holstered at all times and let the security team people who have been trained deal with the threat as they've been taught to. That's a good question.
So if you do carry concealed in church, what's the general rule? What should you be doing or not doing? Should you first kind of consult with your church leadership about what to do, what not to do, know the security plan, that sort of thing?
I would say yes. Consult with your leaders, senior pastor, your leadership in the church, because there should be an emergency action plan. And every church, Lawrence, has to make these very hard decisions for themselves because there are options. And not every church is going to want to respond the same as every other church. So that kind of thing needs to be decided in advance. How are we going to respond? What is the protocol for every level of threat? I always encourage people who are carrying concealed, again, to keep their weapons concealed. Do not access them unless they absolutely have to. And it's a very clear deadly threat. Even then, it's still best to let your trained and educated security team deal with the threat and everybody else just get down so that there's hopefully no one else is harmed if it comes to that.
Last question. We don't want churches,
Sure.
obviously, to become armed fortresses. How does the church balance security with being an open and welcoming place where people come to hear the gospel?
Well, number one, when I'm training the teams that I train, I encourage them not to look militaristic, not to dress that way, not to behave that way. I want them to have a pleasant demeanor, for them to smile, to be pleasant to deal with, to extend a friendly hand to people. At the same time, to be vigilant and to be sure that they're looking around carefully. So there's, again, a thin line that they walk between guarding the sheep and being a welcoming group of people. That's important. Um, so again, every church is different, but I always encourage people to be careful about what they're doing, how they're behaving, how they're looking, so that they still look Christ-like.
That's church security expert Jim Wilcox. And let's welcome in now managing editor Mark Maynard and content editor Chip Hutchison. Guys, one thing that really made my blood boil when I watched that video was former CNN journalist Don Lemon playing a journalist and showing his complete ignorance of the First Amendment. Mark, what's your kind of reaction to what you saw?
Yeah, I thought the same thing, Lawrence. And he acted as if he were a journalist and said it was just a journalist thing he was doing. But he was provoking, he was stirring it up, and there was no place for that. That's not journalism at all. And I thought he looked really bad there, and I think anybody that watched that video would agree.
Chip, you have experience in both journalism and in pastoring churches. What struck you most about what you saw?
I think the thing that bothered me the most is what was reported, the way children were frightened. I mean, don't bring what should be adult behavior and act like a child. And they frightened children. They were, it was so upsetting. And we revere the church. It doesn't matter what your denomination is as a sacred space. And the fact that these protesters could think they could go in and cause a disturbance is mind-boggling to me. That we go back 50 years ago, that wouldn't have happened. That fact. And then I'll tell you what, one thing really has bothered me, and I'm not seeing much said about it, talking about one of the pastors is a nice employee. What criteria do we put on how you can respond to people? Just because somebody is a policeman or fill in the blank, does that give you the right to go in and disrupt a church service? No, it does not. I know that Jonathan Parnell, who is not a nice employee, was the only pastor listed on the statement that was released by the church. So let's don't go into assumptions, and let's don't make up the facts or so-called facts as we go. Get the truth, but going into a church, and whether it's a Baptist church, whether it's a Jewish synagogue, whatever it is, that is not the appropriate response.
Yeah, I think the ICE agent was one of the elders of the church. Of course, we believe in the right to protest, but
yes,
that crossed the line. You can protest on the sidewalk, make all the noise you want, as long as you're not blocking the entrance and threatening people, but getting inside the church is another matter. Mark, you've known Jim Wilcox for a long time. He knows what he's talking about, doesn't he?
He does. He is an expert on the church security, and I will promise his training is just so good, and something that churches really need to look at. If not him, someone else that can train and teach people how to respond to situations like this, because they're going to come. And this one is the first one we've seen like this, or the first one at least that's been kind of been out in the news. But I'm sure this won't be the last one of those kind of things that happens. You know how that go. One starts and then there's another one. So be prepared. Get your church prepared, and get somebody like Jim to come in. And I know we had it when I was at Unity Baptist in Ashland. We actually had the police come in and help us, kind of set up a training thing and set up a security situation. And they found things that you just cannot believe. I think we had 22 ways to get in the church or something, and those sometimes the doors were locked, sometimes they weren't. Just simple things that you think you would know, but once they tell you, you're like, wow, you do find out. And as to your point, when you were talking to Jim about concealed carry, the smaller the churches we have around here, the more people have the concealed carry, and they are packing in the pews, I can promise. And he's exactly right. You don't want to just start firing, because you're going to hit your own people probably. But they have different ways to train and show you how to use that, and how to it's okay if you have a few people like that. It's not the worst thing in the world, but just make sure they're trained and know what to do with it.
Well, you can contact Jim through his website called fearlessdefense.com. And we'll also be posting a story on KentuckyToday.com, which would include Jim's contact information. A couple of other things I want to get to, guys. First, a bill filed that would exempt churches from having to collect the sales tax. Of course, the messengers to the KBC annual meeting passed a resolution urging lawmakers to do that. I asked the bill's sponsor, Representative Jim Tipton of Taylorsville, about why his colleagues should vote to exempt churches from the sales tax. Here's part of that interview.
Number one, these are groups out there to help people. They're trying to help people in need. They're trying to provide ministry. They're trying to provide services. And I just feel like that this is not something that they should be subject to. And also, I think the administrative burden. I think a lot of people aren't even aware they're supposed to do this. So I suspect that this has been going on for some time. It's kind of interesting. If you have a meal and just accept donations, you don't have to collect. You don't have to collect the sales tax on that. But if you happen to say $10, you're supposed to collect that sales tax on that. So I just don't. Number two things, I don't think it's. I think it's a detriment to our groups that are out here trying to provide ministry and help people. And from an administrative standpoint, I just don't think it's practical, especially for a lot of these small groups.
So, guys, your thoughts on Tipton's reasoning there? Two reasons. One, churches do good. Second, it's an administrative burden. Chip, what do you think?
Well, I think he said it real well, and of course we support this measure. And the reality is, most churches until the last year or two were not aware that they were even supposed to be reporting this. And then the fact is that they're not doing it as money makers. They're doing it just to cover their cost. And for smaller churches, that's a huge factor. So I am very hopeful that this legislation will pass. Those who did pass the limit and have not been doing it, they now are just being made aware of it. So, that's just I think if our founding fathers thought that churches were going to be taxed for this type of thing, I think they'd be very critical that is being done, and they would be very supportive of this idea and this legislation.
Mark, you've been in church leadership. You know how these things work. And as Chip said, until a couple of years ago, we weren't even aware that churches were supposed to be, not in every case, but in many circumstances, if they're charging for an event like Upward Basketball, they should need to collect the sales tax.
Yeah, to me, it's a common sense bill. And I think Representative Tipton is right to bring it forward. And I can't imagine anybody being against that, because for one, how much money is it even bringing in?
No.
Even if people were reporting it all the time, and I think a lot of churches would not even know that they're supposed to report that. So I think it's a common sense thing. I can't imagine it not getting through, but we've seen stranger things along those lines too.
Well, last year, he sponsored a similar bill that included all nonprofits, and the fiscal note was a little over $4 million, which is not much for a $16 billion budget. So just churches would be even less than that. So I think the impact would be negligible. Tipton said his bill could be part of a larger budget bill, but he also said that, grassroots support can make a difference. So we posted on KentuckyToday.com in the story about this how you can contact your legislator and contact House and Senate leadership. Well, moving on from the sublime to the more sublime, since we're all sports fans here in this area. I'm U of L, you're UK, but we have to be impressed by what Indiana football did, winning the College Football Playoff National Championship. Guys, does this give us hope?
I think absolutely. It gives us fans at UK and Louisville and Purdue and, just almost any of us, the dream, it's still there, that we can dare to dream that we could be a national champion as well. And what Kurt Signetti has done is remarkable. to say the least. He has what he's done in 2 years. 27-2 in 2 years, 16-0 this year. First time since 1894 anybody's gone 16-0. Yale puts him up there with the Yale Bulldogs of that 1894. And who knows who was on that team or the coach was, but people are going to remember Kirk Cignetti, and he has kind of shown the way a little bit. Now, I don't know. Does that mean just because Indiana won, does that mean, okay, we're going to go 11-0 next year too? I doubt it. There's still a few hills to climb there, but it does give you hope. That they did it, and they. You know what, to me, was also remarkable? They did it without any 4- and 5-star recruits.
Yeah.
I mean, they had, so kudos to him for the game planning, and, kudos to him for getting a group to believe, and not just his players. He got his administration to believe. He got, the guys that clean the locker rooms to believe. He got everybody in that program to believe. And I think that's the secret sauce, and that's what we have to do at these other programs.
Chip, is Cignetti arguably the best coach in America?
It would be hard to debate that right now, especially as Mark mentioned, taking players who were not highly recruited and making them national champions. And I guess I still struggle with rooting for Indiana for anything, but I am glad they won. It was just in Mark's headline, Hoosiers too. That certainly is an adequate and accurate description. I'm so glad they won. With Mendoza wanting to play for Miami, and they didn't want him, and now he comes back and wins the Heisman and leads Indiana to the national championship over Miami. I think it's going to we need to refocus how all these players are rated. Vanderbilt's quarterback was, not rated. Here he was number 2 in the Heisman voting, and it just shows you what a good coach and a good, Lawrence, you mentioned this, a good atmosphere means. There's more than just your athletic ability. Is there chemistry? And, I think we've all questioned whether the UK basketball team has chemistry. I'm hopeful after this last win over Tennessee, that proves that they do. But chemistry and the belief and the value that a coach puts on players, and then the way the players can respect and trust the coach and the coaching staff is invaluable. And my goodness, in today's world where loyalty means nothing in sports, with free agency in the pros and in essence free agency at the college ranks with the NIL and the portal, it's good to see a team win that nobody expected to win.
Well, unfortunately, part of the equation today is money. So hopefully, I hope at least, I'm kind of old school, that there'll at least be some guardrails put around this whole NIL compensation thing, because right now it's out of control. It's the wild, wild west. But, no matter how much he was paid, quarterback Fernando Mendoza, he played a gutsy game. He took some cheap shots from Miami early on, and he kept going. And then an iconic shot of him crossing the goal line, flying across the goal line. He'll be a hero for Indiana. There'll be a statue probably in years to come. All right. As we close out, you've probably noticed our impressive new surroundings, our new home, our new set, thanks to our video expert, video guy, Frank Pierre, who oversaw the redesign of our studio space here. Looks good. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Frank. And thank you for watching the Kentucky Today podcast. Tell others about it. And for more on the Kentucky Baptist Convention and the cooperative program that makes this program possible, go to kybaptist.org. Lord willing, we'll see you next time on the Kentucky Today podcast.